people. I'm here to introduce our key moderator, Mr. Klain. He's one of the executive directors, head of quality all over Techmark Global Solutions. And Keith is really awesome. He's been here for the past 3 years. He's actually, if you think about a thought leader in testing or a thought leader in the space, there's a lot of self-proclaimed thought leaders. Keith is actually one of those because he has his own blog and he has his own podcast. That by default makes him a thought leader in testing. So please welcome to the stage Mr. Keith Klain and the testing panel.
Thanks, Ryan. You know, Ryan's such a great example of QASymphony's commitment to hiring kids into tech jobs. He's just so cute, isn't he? So we're going to keep this session kind of loose, and he gave me this thing which your questions are supposed to pop up on. Everybody up here, Clint, Ashley, and Paul have all spoken today. They've been at the QualityJams multiple times. I think, Ashley, this might be your first time.
This is my first time.
First time, so welcome. Paul's been, you were here last year.
Yeah,
right?
It's a great event.
So I'm not going to, they've already been introduced, so I'm not going to go through their backgrounds. But what we wanted to talk about today is just some kind of practical things people can do to improve testing. That's something that's very close to my heart, and I work with my clients a lot on how do we move from square A to square B. So as we go through, if you've got questions, just ping them to this thing, and hopefully they'll pop up on here. But I'm going to start off with you, Paul. And so my first question to you is, a lot of the companies that I work with, and seems to be kind of a broad brush I'll use to make this comment, but their test automation approach is kind of cobbled together of a bunch of different tools and practices and kind of spread out. And one of the kind of principles of moving to continuous integration or continuous deployment, depending how you define those terms, is to have a more holistic view of your automation suite or your automation approach. This is obviously one of your expertise, one of your many expertise. How do you get people moving in that direction? So, like, what are some things you say, like, all right, here's the first thing we should do to get a good view of what we have for automation, and how do we then move it into a more advanced or mature approach?
Yeah, so you were supposed to share all the questions with me beforehand. That's a loaded one. I don't know where to go with that. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. So I deal with a lot of companies that are all different stages in the life cycle of learning and in maturity of learning how to do test automation and how to put it into their process. And of course, I see plenty of companies who have tried, hey, we tried Selenium, we tried Coded UI, we tried Cucumber, we tried all these different.
Anymore, is it?
It's still pretty cool. A lot of people think,
cool? Okay.
I don't know what's surpassed it. I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. Especially with the Sauce Labs guy on the stage, I think it's pretty cool.
Yes, thank you.
But yeah, I think that you're going to have a lot of different tools. If you're doing it right, you're going to use the right tool for the right job at the right time. I think that where we run into trouble is not being able to consolidate the view of that and give the information really directly to people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how do you tie that to, because I'm constantly banging on about people's test strategy isn't aligned to their business strategy. What are some practical things people can do to connect their test automation strategy to their business strategy?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with education internally. So one of the things that I see a lot is I think that it's really easy to get the blinders on with the technologies that we use or the work that we do day to day. I don't know if you guys see this or not. I think that it's very easy to think about, hey, I'm a tester. Hey, I'm here to test the code and to get really good at that craft. But the business domain is just as valuable, and it's really, really important to understand, why is my company here? Why does it exist? Why do we come to work every day, and how do we get to keep doing that, right? And then tie that into things. So I think education is really, really important.
Okay. Ashley, you've done a lot of work with product managers and...
Yeah, exactly what Paul said. What we do an exercise every quarter where we're looking at our business strategy and objectives and priorities. And anything that we do, does it feed into one of those? If it doesn't, we really have to consider if it's providing value to the business and therefore our clients.
So you literally map them out.
We literally map them out.
That's a great exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, so any goal that we've set, I discussed some goals yesterday around engineering productivity. Those all feed into goals of delivering value to our customers faster, delivering our products faster. So as long as it aligns to those objectives and priorities, making sure that they map back to that so that you're providing value to your business.
And do you, so like for your test teams or product teams, or how do the objectives work? Do you map, are they like principled objectives, or are they, we want to push this much product out, we want to, like?
They're more principles. We don't say X%.
Okay.
That's, when you get strapped down into those promised deliverables, that's, I think, when you crush the soul of your development teams. Because I think we've just had times where somebody has promised a feature without really checking back to see what it took to deliver it.
Right.
However, let's make them more holistic. Let's make them bigger picture. And then let's see what we can deliver when talking to the teams and what's actually feasible with the teams.
Right. How do you work across, because you're kind of a cross-functional role. I know the best to describe what you do, which is great because I think that's most successful people. It's very difficult to describe exactly what they do. How do you bridge that gap between developers, testers, business people? Do you bring everybody cookies? Do you
Well, Alex Schladebeck has this great thing called biscuit-driven development, so she brings biscuits.
All right.
But no, software is for the people, and it's not just for our clients. And I really take time to develop those relationships. I've worked at Blackboard for 13 years, and there's a lot of developers that have been there as long or longer than myself. We know each other. We know what makes each other tick. And when you start to build those personal relationships with people, you want to do more for them. You want to help them. You want to do everything you can to make your friend or your colleague successful as well, not just yourself.
Yeah, it's about goal alignment.
Yeah, it's about communication. It's about relationship development. One of the courses I never thought I'd need in my liberal arts education was peer mediation. I use that every day.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably the biggest thing you do.
Yeah, this is one thing I never knew I would need in the tech field, but there you have it. I mean, it's one of the things, yeah.
So Clint, Selenium is still cool, sorry about that. So give me an example of something, like a typical thing your clients come into Sauce Labs and you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so typically what we'll get is with everything kind of moving to the SaaS model, right? And everyone's trying to get more efficiency and scale. They'll come and say, can you take our existing, more of a commercial test tool, and can you run that on the Sauce Cloud? And we're just like, no. And the reason being is that what we're trying to do is we want to help customers optimize their tests and do the right thing. Like you said, we're not really concerned about the tool itself, but we're more about, okay, how can we make testing much more efficient? And I talked about this yesterday during my presentation. It's also about understanding the organizational structure and the skill set of your team. So when you talk about that communication between the various stakeholders and groups, you have to understand where are they in this journey that you're trying to bring everyone together. Right. So if you understand that, then that's going to really help them. So I try to get them to understand that and just where they're going.
Yeah, and do you have a kind of prep kit for say okay, go back and do this and then come talk to me in 6 months, or?
No, actually, we try to do as much hand-holding as possible, with the customer, because there's a lot of things, they don't know what they don't know, right?
Right.
So you have to really kind of just work with them, talk to the different organizations, and just find out where they are, right? Because a lot of times they'll own a lot of software products, or they'll have these processes that are in place, but they don't really understand how it impacts other parts of the organization. So you just got to have those conversations, sit down with them, and actually just kind of guide them to make the right decision, regardless of whether they're coming to us or using a competitive solution, but just trying to get them on the right track.
Right. So I have one question I want to ask all of you, and then we're getting a ton of great questions in here, so we'll switch over. We've only got about 15 minutes left anyway. So what I want to ask you is, what kind of hack or a secret thing you do that you'd like to impart to these folks about your peer mediation class? That's something that you realize. Is there a book that you've read? Is there something that what's a little secret hack that you do that maybe you don't want to share if it's a competitive advantage? But
no, anybody else want to go first, or?
It was your turn, Paul. I'm mediating.
I don't get to mediate. Okay, got it.
I was just copying whatever you say. So
No, I have this thought of gray matter upgrades and forced gray matter upgrades. So gray matter is brain matter, right? So I try to force myself to upgrade my brain matter one way or the other, whether it's through discipline or activities or habits. One thing I do is I try to read 30 minutes or more a day.
Real paper.
Well, yes, so we can debate that, but yes. No, I think the brain works a
I
different
like
way
to
when you look
turn
at
a
paper.
page.
It does.
See,
It
for work,
absolutely
I
does. There's studies on
want
it.
no paper.
Yeah.
For personal reading, I obviously read books, but like
Yeah.
for work, I literally try and print nothing.
So one of these areas that I do this in is I have a server in my office that's, please don't hack it again, whoever did it last time. The Chinese got into it or something, I don't know what happened. But I have this server that's on Linux, it's on Ubuntu, and it breaks every once in a while because I haven't done an upgrade, or when I do an upgrade, it breaks, and some service on it breaks, and that forces me to go back and have to learn about it. Now, you might think that's a big waste of time, but the number of things that I've learned about running a server in an office space, about setting up a network, about the services that are running there has been huge, and it forces me to do this. Talks are the same way. Having to prepare when you know people are going to be watching you, it's a forced thing.
Yeah, you mentioned reading. One of the books that's really stuck out to me is a book called Switch, how to change things when change is hard. And it's really about finding what motivates people. And there's an analogy called the elephant and the rider, and the elephant is the emotional and the rider is the logical. The elephant's gonna go wherever the hell it wants to. But a rider has to understand what motivates that elephant. So if you think about your business or your team or the people you're working with as the elephant, the emotional side, you really learn what motivates them to whether do what you want to do or what the business needs to do, but getting them on board without feeling like, oh, it's just one more thing I have to do today. Like really building that trust relationship.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I would say for me, it's a combination of, I do audiobooks as well. Just because with my travel schedule, I try to listen to as many different types of books, either, business books or industry books, but I also try to, look at fiction. Like I finished reading Ready Player One. So I try to read the book and then see the movie, right? So, somebody saw it. I got it. All right. Yeah.
Nice job.
Yeah, wherever that one person is, great. But
You got claps just for bringing it up. That's
yeah, exactly. I wish I could get some money off of that.
Star Wars.
Yeah. But yeah, I try to do things that I can apply, to my job in terms of the types of books that I read. Right. Actually, just keep me fresh and just working with different customers.
Okay, I'm going to go to some questions here, some interesting ones, and then some ones clearly Ryan put in that aren't that interesting.
So he's precious.
He is.
Yeah.
He's a doll, isn't he? Is there an ideal developer to tester ratio in agile teams? Anybody want to?
Everybody should be a tester, developer or not.
Nah. See, this is why everybody likes you.
No. I don't like that. I don't like to answer that with a quantifiable number because it could be one. I've been on teams where it's 1 to 2. I've been on teams where it's 1 to 5. I've been on teams where it's 1 to 10 or 0 to 10.
I think that's the wrong question.
It depends. Yeah. So it's what's your mentality? Are you embracing testing as a team-owned activity, or are you viewing it as a role that you're tossing over to somebody? Or are you embracing it as a coach and you want that person to coach that team? So I can't really give a good answer to that number or that ratio. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, and to me, it's always been, it depends. I always say give them that answer, but it's true because if they're going through some sort of, agile or DevOps transformation, the structure of that team is going to be entirely different. So that ratio might not even matter in that instance.
Yeah. I would say find out what you need to test and how you're going to test it, and then staff your org around that.
Yeah.
Clint, you have a specific question here. What mix would you recommend between testing on emulators or real device mobile testing?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would recommend that, especially if you're starting your journey in terms of mobile automation or just mobile testing in general, if you're trying to implement some sort of continuous delivery or continuous testing strategy, in order for that to be consistent, you need to make sure that you're going to have something that's going to be reliable. So starting off with emulators and simulators will really help you build that continuous testing into your DevOps pipeline. When you use real devices, you should use real devices as well. So I would start off with a subset of emulators, simulators, and then kind of increase that to real devices as you kind of mature. And the way I always talk about separating it is, for the things that are non-phone or device specific, use the emulators, simulators for that, and then do everything else on the real device. And one quick thing I want to point out is that there's this myth that if you're not testing on the real device, you're not actually doing testing, which isn't true. But if you're trying to really build that continuous testing strategy, you want to have a really good mix of all three.
Okay, here's another question and we can all take a stab at. What are some common pitfalls that companies face once they start down the CI/CD implementation path? Go ahead.
Assert true. I don't know. Like,
I think it's easy to start saying, oh, we automate everything. And I don't believe that at all. I think there's still certainly a world for, you need human-based testing. You need to build empathy still with your users. You need to understand them. And you need human eyes on things. I really don't feel you can automate everything and leave it at that and then go.
Yeah.
I think that's a common misconception I've heard about, read about, experienced. I've heard of people wanting to automate their exploratory testing, and it breaks my heart. But why not use that and find that intersection of automation and exploratory? So as you're automating, what are you exploring while you're automating?
Right.
So there's different ways and different points at which you do that, but I think there's just this misconception and pitfall that people say, oh, it just goes away now.
Yeah. I would say that they have no idea what any of those terms mean.
right, yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
they're just-
Education.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the ground shifting under your feet, right? So you're
Right.
getting a new build constantly. What does that mean? How do you deal with a new build constantly? We're used to building uncertainties. We're used to testing uncertainties. The world is much, much less certain than it's ever been before. Everything's moving much, much faster. With AI coming around, you're not even going to be able to replicate the set of data that you had to create the situation that did something in your software. So the ground is always going to be moving. I think getting uncomfortable and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in these situations is going to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I would agree because, of course, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says "test all the things," but
All the right things.
Yes, exactly, all the right things, and it doesn't mean you need to automate every single thing as well, right? But you want to make sure that's part of your strategy, and just like I said, really, use take common sense and understanding the group.
I mean, CI/CD DevOps is like totally jump the shark for buzzword bingo,
Right.
consultancy and stuff. So, I mean, a good book I read recently is obviously, I think it's been around for a while, but the Continuous Delivery book, Jez Humbolt's
yeah.
book, which is fantastic. And the key theme I took out of that was just focus on your pipeline. The rest is just all stuff around it. But if you focus on your pipeline, what you call things will kind of sort itself out. Let me see here. I had one right here, and then they keep popping up.
And that whole
down
series
here.
is good. That's on the Martin Fowler signature series, right?
Yes.
Like from Madison
Yeah.
Wesley. They
I think-
have
Absolutely.
terrific.
One of my favorite things in that book is actually the continuous delivery model that they provide in the book. You can always adapt it to meet your needs too, but what we're doing is you can't just say your continuous delivery and go. What I think a lot of teams miss is that, how do I get there? And what are the basic things I need to do? And there's a really good model in there for what's level 0, what's level 1.
Yes.
And walking through that. To
Not a
learn how to
huge
walk
fan
that
of
walk.
maturity models, but
Right, but-
they're actually more heuristic based in
Yes.
that model. So you can
Yeah.
here's some things that kind of look like we're at this
Exactly.
at this stage. This is kind of an old question that gets asked a lot, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. Is what types of skills do you encourage testers to develop now to kind of stay current with the market?
Yeah.
Anyone?
I think there's a lot of. Do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
you were about to-
No, please do. Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of pressure on testers today to want to up their game with only programming, with only test automation. And I think
Because that's what the world needs is a bunch of crappy Java programmers.
I'm telling you, and you slapped my shoulder like I have something to do with that. I don't. I appreciate that, Keith. So no, I think that there's a lot of pressure on people to feel like they have to opt into that. And I think there's so much more to testing than that. Testing, and we've talked about humans. Almost every question that we've had up here has gone back to human beings.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that those relationships with people, human beings, that we're what make it work. We're the ones that this is done for. We're the ones that make it work. Learning the craft of testing is about much, much more than automation or programming. There's so much more to it. Even just like the idea of there's 5 schools of testing. Did you know that? I didn't know that until a year ago, right? Like, go study what they are. Find out what. Right, I know, we can have this huge argument now. We can all fight and stuff. But there's so much more to learn. Heuristics, methodologies, who's come before, what they had to say, how they thought about things. And that will help you build your testing skills.
I think one of the things I value most, I wasn't in computer science. I very much a liberal arts, all women's college. I studied computer information systems, but it's more the intersection of people and businesses and technology, and I love that. And so it's one of the biggest skills is how do you take information from so many places and narrow it down to what's important to work towards. And you don't get that just from studying programming.
Right.
You get that from studying everything, humanities, sociology, history, anything like that.
developing other skills.
And developing other skills.
How do I learn how to focus on that?
Exactly.
Yeah, and
You learn how to learn.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that because one of the things that it's been frustrating, I mean, for the past 20 years or so, every time a new technology or a new methodology comes in, they go to the testers and say, okay, now you need to do this. As if you don't do it, you're going to be irrelevant, you're going to be a dinosaur, you're never going to be able to work in this industry again, right? So I don't believe in trying to just, retrofit the skills to fit the methodology, utilize what you have. That's one of the reasons I like, one of my favorite coaches is Phil Jackson. When he created the triangle offense for the Lakers, everybody had a specific
The Bulls. He created the triangle offense for the Bulls. I'm from Chicago.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
He brought it to LA.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm originally from Oklahoma, so I just had to pick a random team. But,
Sports.
yay sports. There you go. Okay. So where was I going with this? Oh,
Sorry.
so each person had a specific role that, if they were a good outside shooter, if they were a center, it really didn't matter that everyone had a very specific skill set that they could use and be able to contribute in that offense, right? So I think the same thing is with QA. You have people that have really deep business knowledge, especially if you're in industries, like the finance industry, or the medical industry or things like that, that you can take and utilize that across the board.
Yeah.
And again, the ones that can communicate and kind of bridge those folks together really helps from a skill set perspective.
Somebody clearly has some funny questions they want to ask, so I'll get to those after we're nearly out of time. Ryan still wants to get me back for the kid
He's
comment.
got to come up here and
Yes,
do it, right?
yeah, absolutely. So here's an interesting question, though. How long do you think a test should be run manually before it's automated?
Is this from?
No, you're next
I
to
don't-
me, so I'm looking at you. So, sorry. Anyone?
I think plenty of tests shouldn't be run
Yeah, I
manually
have
before
lots
they're
of thoughts.
automated, and plenty of times things shouldn't be automated when they're manual. Like they're two different things.
Yeah.
I don't see them as being the same thing. Sometimes you automate something specifically because you can't do it manually so easy.
There's a lot that's not going to tell you how the user actually feels. I'm in education. I know there's not an automated test that's going to tell me that this grading functionality is frustrating for the user because it's so difficult to make it through the workflow. And when you remove that manual aspect of it, and that's why I hate to call it manual testing, I like to call it human-based testing,
Or just testing.
Or just testing. Like,
Yeah.
You still get that emotion like, oh my God, this is really frustrating. How do I get that feedback back to then the product owner or product manager to say, this was incredibly difficult for me, just putting on that instructor hat. And so I hate to say once you've run it more than once, then you should automate it because that's not always the case.
It's not.
Right?
Totally agree.
Here's another question, and I won't look at you, Paul. Do you have any recommendations for automation frameworks for API testing?
Automation frameworks for API testing.
So
I'm not looking at you. Just El Toro.
So I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, of course, and what your stack is and those types of things. So some of the ones that are well known are things like Postman, right? So one of the cool things about Postman is that pretty much anybody can get into it and figure out how to use it. They've got some automated tests that you can generate from that, or some snippets for automated tests. You can tie that into continuous integration. Here we go again with Newman. And then they also use an open API. I forget exactly what it's called, but there's an open protocol, and you can take requests from I'm losing, the day has been too long for me, I guess. You can take some of these documentation tools, and I can't remember the one I'm trying to think of right now, and actually transfer the request over from that into Postman and use it. There are lots of other frameworks out there, so Rest Assured is one in Java, Rest Sharp is one in C Sharp, although it's not as supported. There are lots and lots of tools out there. In Python, people still like to use HTTP requests, or requests, I think is the library.
I'll ask one more normal question, and I'll ask a couple of these funny ones. Do you have any tips for quantifying the value of testing for your business?
So I don't know if anybody's read this State of DevOps report. What I'm focusing on personally, and it's seeming to start to work for us, is we're looking at a few things that would feed into your throughput and your stability. So you want to look at what is your lead time? How long is it taking you? So how long are your tests taking to run? That's a quantifiable number you can provide. What percent is manual? In the State of DevOps report, the high-performing DevOps organizations are not at 0% manual. They are at 35% manual. There's no reason to get to that much. So just look at your indicator. The low and medium performing ones were in more the 50% range. So there's still a good, 15% cushion. What am I doing right? The other one that we're looking at is the percent deterministic or reliability factor. So can I trust my tests? So those are the more quantifiable things that we're looking at as a company across all of our products to see how are we heading? Are we heading in the right direction? We think that's a good indicator if we're getting the continuous delivery and high-performing organization or not. The thing is that metrics are meant to be gamed. You don't want to look at one single metric. You want to look at holistically, where I think we're good at looking at the forest through the trees as testers as a profession. And so looking holistically at all of these things and all of these many factors. But those are the three ones that we're really chasing after specifically. Although there's many others in DevOps that you can go to, like mean time to recover, things like that. But
Yeah. And I would qualify that a little bit, that some of the test metrics are highly dysfunctional, right? And if they're not, so I've shied people away from that. But like how often you can deploy, there's some larger ones you can.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would add to that you have to look at the financials, right? Because you hate to do things in hindsight or retrospect, but you have to look at what is this costing us when we put out things that should work that don't work, right? Every software that goes out is going to have some sort of defect, but you have to look at a level of severity. But what is it costing us? And if you can be able to quantify that with actual numbers and be able to show that if we're able to make sure that we can test earlier in the life cycle and we have these resources, then you can justify that, because a lot of times that's what the business is looking for. Tell me how this is going to make me money.
Right. Did you have anyone that you want to add to that? No? Okay. All right. So we're out of time, so I'll ask some of these questions that Ryan must want answered. So I'd like all your opinion on this. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Sandwich or taco?
What's that?
Sandwich or taco?
Sandwich or taco. I'm going to say no.
I say yes.
You'd say yes?
No.
I guess it depends what type of bun. If you're using a New England bun, I would say no. So I'm up in New England, definitely no. If you had a Midwestern bun,
Your
it might
accent
be a
changed when
sandwich.
you said that, and I started hearing the Pak the Ka, now, but yeah.
Is it still a hot dog if you don't use a bun? If you use a regular piece of bread, I guess it could be a sandwich. I don't know.
I'm just getting visions of the Simpsons episode and what consists of a hot dog, and ew.
Yes, exactly. All right, so here's the last question. This is clearly from Ryan. So do Paul and Ashley go to the same hairdresser? Same question for Keith and Clint.
Yeah. I don't know. I go to Gillette. Who do you?
Yeah. This just doesn't happen.
I'm a
This
working
takes
mom
lot
of
effort.
2 young girls, so I'm lucky if I make it to the hairdresser once every 2 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And clearly her hair is so much better than mine.
I don't know, the hairdryer actually ate my hair this morning. It's like, oh, still smells like burning to me.
Is that what I smelled? I thought I smelled something.
So I think that's it for us, Ryan. I don't know where you are. You're probably hiding somewhere in plain sight. Stand up, Ryan. Here he comes.
All right, give it up for our panel.
Thank you. I got that back.
Thank you, man.